Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Tobias. I'm on the design team, and yeah, uh, this talk is not going to be totally new to those of you who have seen my previous Widget talks. I used to always give these talks about like sort of state of GNOME Mobile and like adaptive apps and just generally the app ecosystem and like developer tools and so on. And this is going to be like basically another one in that series. I didn't give one last year because there were no real conferences, and I think at the time the thinking was very optimistic that like, oh, next year there's going to be conferences again. We can, do things in the future, but that future is not here yet. So here we are. This is, I guess, like the best we can do at the moment. It's a little bit unfortunate because this talk is going to have a lot of demos, and some of them are going to have like animated things, and those are going to look very bad probably because the frame rate is not is not great through this. So maybe I can, like, where I'm going to put the slides, maybe I can put links to all the demos so you can build them yourself and try them. But yeah, that's kind of a handicap here. And I'll try to like do things a whole bunch of times so that maybe you can catch some of the frames in between, but it's not going to be ideal. But yeah, so basically I'll pick up from where I left off in like 2019 when I last gave this talk, and kind of like bring you up to speed on where we are now, and then talk a little bit about the future. But yeah, since it's been a while, there's quite a few sort of like high-level things to catch you up on here at the beginning. The first of which is that there is actual hardware now. There are like real mainland Linux phones, not just like the Librem 5, but also the Pine phone, and there's a whole bunch of them out there, and people are using them and developing on them. It's cool, right? Like this is something that we did not have at any point in the past, and it's a real step forward, and I think we can be really proud of that. On the software side, one really interesting thing that happened, like basically since I last gave this talk, is that libhandy and the kind of like whole adaptive way of building apps went from this kind of like cool thing that a few people were doing sort of and in parts of the ecosystem to really like a core part of the GNOME ecosystem, where libhandy is now kind of like the de facto library where we put new widgets for GNOME apps, regardless of like adaptiveness or whatever. And along with that, also, I think like the whole app ecosystem, both core and third party, has really embraced this direction, and we're seeing a lot of great progress in that sense. I think over the last like 3 years, we've slowly been porting a large portion of the core apps. Just like to talk about a few that made like significant progress recently. Geary, like there was a fairly long-winded process, but like it's finally at the point where most of the major things are adaptive. Like there's still some things to improve around the edges, but like sort of the base layout where like it folds into various columns and so on. That is sort of upstream now, and yeah, like all of the major pieces are kind of in place. There's going to be more work coming probably, but there always is, right? Another one, for example, is Calculator, which just very recently Adrian Plazas did some really good work on, and it's now fully adaptive upstream, including all the crazy modes. I can quickly show you that because it's pretty cool. So like if it's really large or like sort of the larger sizes, there's this max width, which is actually it's something that we didn't really have before. I think before either it wasn't resizable or like it just looked really bad. I'm not really sure, but anyway, now it does something sensible when you make it large. Then when it's small, like so it does shrink to like fairly small sizes. Even in like the crazy programming mode or whatever, like this all still works. And it has a really nice thing where like it's full width and the narrow width, and so like it changes the column width there. And yeah, I mean it's just like another example of like if you do things properly and upstream, like there's some real benefits for everyone from that kind of thing. And yeah, some other recent example, like Maps got some really nice updates at 40, thanks to I think mostly James Westman. Bilal and Chris like did a bunch of work on stuff like characters and a whole bunch of other, so the smaller like utility apps. They're all like slowly moving towards being adaptive or are already there. And yeah, I think we've really made a lot of good progress here over the last few years, and I think we'll continue to for the next few cycles. The third-party apps, as usual, are a little bit ahead, where like I think basically for the last 2 years or so, like almost every third-party app that where it makes sense for it to run on like a mobile form factor has been adaptive. Yeah, these are just like a few of the nicer examples. One that I want to show you is this translation app called Dialog. And the cool thing here is that there's like you have these two entries like next to each other on a wider screen. Then when you make it narrow, it just puts them above one another. It's just like a really natural, nice way of doing that. So yeah, kudos to the developers. This is a really well done app. So yeah, that's kind of like the current app ecosystem we have. Looking ahead a little bit, like GTK4 is finally out, and that's sort of a big generational shift. Like we're not really seeing a ton of the benefits of that yet because most of our apps are not actually ported yet. But that's going to be ramping up like the next few cycles. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but that's going to be really, really cool. Zooming out a little bit from our like specific context to like the wider industry, one of the things that's been really interesting the last few years is how like the entire industry is moving in a similar direction to what we have been trying to do, where like basically you have a single app, code base, and UI, and you just adapt it to various form factors in sort of like the ways that are necessary, but like without completely redoing the app. And I think particularly interesting is that Apple is also doing it now, where like in the past they were kind of like the odd one out, where they were always like, no, the iPhone is like a special flower, and the Mac is completely, you know, its own thing, and like you should make two completely separate apps. But like with if you like look at last year's WWDC developer talks, like there's a lot of talk about like sort of these various like device form factors, and then like with Mac Catalyst you can port iPad apps to the Mac. Like it's just sort of like an automatic part of your development workflow. And like even on the design patterns side, they're talking about like you have a tab bar at the bottom like on a phone. He moves that same stuff to the sidebar on the tablet, and then the sidebar with some small changes stays exactly the same on the Mac. And so it's really cool to see that everyone is sort of like going in the same direction, and you know, I guess it validates what we're doing also from a conceptual point of view. So yeah, that's a little bit sort of like the high level updates. Let's dive into widgets. So I think when I was last giving this talk, we were kind of at the point where most of the important widgets that you needed to like actually port apps, like to sort of, I don't know, do navigation and things like that, we kind of had. But we were working on a lot of like sort of nice sort of improvements on top of that, like for example the back swipe gestures and so on. And all of that stuff is now merged and has been in actual use for like over a year. So I think yeah, none of that is like particularly new, but I'm gonna go through them quickly anyway, just like to catch you up. So yeah, I think the first and maybe most important one of those is like the swipe gestures, especially on DAC and leaflet. So here's an example in context where at the smaller sizes, basically like you can click the back button, or you can like on a touchpad or a touch screen, just like sort of swipe, just acceleration and sort of just, you know, like all of these little details, like it dims the background and just like behaves the way you would expect it to, which as always is always surprisingly hard, right? But yeah, that just works now. And yeah, Alexander Mikalenko did a lot of really good work on this. And yeah, I think like probably all of you are already using some apps that do this, so it's not like particularly new, but yeah. Sort of a sister widget to this one is the flap widget, which is basically the same thing except like not covering the whole view. And this only landed fairly recently, so there's not like a lot of apps that actually use it yet. But so this is kind of like initial step towards porting events, like making it adaptive, that comes with this widget. And basically, yeah, it's like this transient sidebar. It's not like a completely separate view. It's basically like an additional like space to show some information related to the view. So in this case, like the sidebar with the pages. And you can like open it with the button or swipe it like with the same kind of like gestures as the leaflet or the deck. Another one that I don't think I need to show you a special demo for, because all the apps here basically do it, is the round the bottom corner. So that's something that we've wanted for a really long time, and that for technical reasons was always difficult, because like we could round things, but we couldn't like really have that also clip the background, or like flip the children like inside a container. And so essentially, you could end up with glitches where, like, in some cases it's round, and in other cases there's like stuff kind of sticking out. So we couldn't really do that. Thanks to Alexander's work on HUI window, that is finally possible, along with some other really cool things. But yeah, it's just like one of those things where you sort of like think about it and plan for it for years and years, and then eventually like it finally happens, and it's just really cool to see that. Speaking of cool things Alexander did, the tabs widget is another really really cool thing that we got in recently, where basically like historically we had GTK Notebook, which you can kind of use to make tabs widgets, but like it only does a fairly small amount of the stuff that you would want like from a proper like web browser tab system. And so there was a lot of inconsistency between different apps because like they had to implement stuff like pinning or whatever like by themselves, and like the key bindings and like all sorts of stuff. And with these new tabs, it basically has everything that you expect from sort of proper browser level tabs, where like you can sort of reorder them with animations, and you can scroll. Like before, there were like these shitty arrows that was pretty lame. And yeah, you can like move stuff between windows, and like it all works in the way you would expect. And it's just, you know, there's like hundreds and hundreds of little details, but if they're in place, like it just like feels so much better. So yeah, that's currently in web only as far as I know. But it's coming, like in the medium term, it's coming to all the apps that we have that have tabs. So like Nautilus and so on. So yeah, that's going to be really cool, I think. Another one is avatars. So historically, we had a whole bunch of widgets implementing some kind of like standard avatar, or sort of like fallback default avatar thing, where like if there's no avatar picture, like it will generate one from the name and so on. And there's like a lot of edge cases with this, because like sometimes you have a first name, sometimes you have a first name and a last name, sometimes you have like a whole bunch of names. Depending on the size of the characters, like you need to scale it differently. Like there are different sizes at which you want to use them. So yeah, we had a bunch of implementations that all had kind of like different issues. There was one in Fractal and one in Contact, I think, and one. Well, there's the one that's still used in the shell that we're hopefully going to get rid of soon. But yeah, so now there's like a new one in the Handy that actually covers all the edge cases, and that looks nice and like does all the things you would want, including like, for example, if you look at this one and this one, they're not actually the same exact image. Like the letters here are smaller than on here, so that like they're more visible at the smaller sizes, but they don't get huge on the large sizes. So that's all these little details that you really want to get right. And I think we're pretty happy with what we have now. So yeah, thanks Julian and everyone else who worked on making this happen. And I guess like over the next few cycles, we're hopefully gonna get to the point where we just use them everywhere. I think like, yeah, right now they're in Contacts, in Geary, in Calls, and maybe a few other things, but yeah, I think we're getting there. Another one that's also not like super new is the Carousel, which, yeah, I think I already had a working version of that like at my last talk, but now there's an actual app to show you, so maybe that's a bit nicer. So yeah, it's basically just like a paginated scrolling widget. It can be vertical or horizontal, but like, yeah, we usually use it for these kind of like slideshow things, and yeah, you got all the same like nice acceleration gestures as with stuff like back gestures. And yeah, that's just like sort of a cool primitive to have for a whole bunch of places. This is one that I personally really love. It's like a really small detail, but it's just really delightful. So sometimes you have lists where you want sort of like various things to be grouped, but then you also want them to expand. But then when you expand them and they're still like grouped in the list, it looks a bit weird. And so what we have here is the ability to basically like split out things dynamically from the list, so that, yeah, essentially like they become their own kind of like semantic unit. And yeah, it's just like one of those really nice details that I personally really love, and that, yeah, I wish we would do more of this kind of stuff, because it's just like it really elevates things when you have these nice little touches. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much about all the stuff, because I think, yeah, you've all been using it for a while, so it's it's nothing like too new. A few more things to shout out, like generally the HTY window thing makes header bars a lot more flexible. So we can now do like stuff like header bars above the content, or like have them be transparent, or like slide out sometimes, or whatever. Like the whole separation between header bar and content is now essentially gone. So that allows for a whole bunch of cool stuff. The column, which is basically like to have a max width on things, can now also be used vertically. So just like also for max heights or something. And so it was renamed to clamp, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense. There's now a status page widget, which is sort of like for if you want an icon and some text below it or whatever for empty states and the like. And there's also like apps can now in their desktop file like sort of tell the operating system that they're like optimized for mobile. So that's helpful for example, like filtering things out on mobile distributions. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that I guess we got done over the last few years. But now let's talk about future stuff, because I think that's always where the excitement really comes in, right? So one of the things that we've wanted for a really long time, and I think that was sort of like a missing part of our developer story for, yeah, since forever, basically, is a proper widget library that actually like aligns with our platform. Because I think historically, the strategy was always to like move shared widgets into GTK. But then there were always issues with like the release cycles kind of like being misaligned, and often we were like kind of frustrated that like our UX goals could not really be met for like obscure GTK reasons. And so going forward, we really want to have a widget library that is actually like synchronized with our design, that is specific to our platform, and that doesn't like need to have all these extra considerations that are not really relevant for GNOME. And yeah, I mean, basically, like for the last few years, I already alluded to this. LibHandy has kind of become this for GTK3. Like initially, it was just a bunch of adaptive widgets, but then, like since it was the place where everything was going, like people also started adding more generic widgets to it. For example, like the Listros and the avatars and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think it is de facto that now, and we just made it official. But for GTK4, we would like something slightly sort of more like cleaner in terms of branding and messaging. So we're introducing a new library called inbetween, which is named after like the rest of our visual language, like the icons in the style sheet use that name, so it kind of made sense to use it here as well. And basically, initially, it's going to be a GTK, or like it already is a GTK4 port of LibHandy, plus minus a few things that got upstreamed or whatever. And yeah, essentially, like going forward, this is going to be the new place where all the sort of like GNOME-specific widgets go. And it's going to be the place that app developers can look at as like the canonical implementation of all the like core patterns. And in addition to that, one thing that's also currently in the works is a new version of the human interface guidelines, which sort of like it all ties in together in the sense that like historically one of the issues with the HIG was that we were documenting patterns that we didn't like have a single like canonical implementation for. So like we would describe a thing, but then you would have to build it yourself, like based on basically that description. And like there were all sorts of copy-pasted implementations in various apps, or still are in some cases. And so going forward, what we want is like for the human interface guidelines to actually be synchronized with libadwaita, so that like you read about a design pattern like in the HIG, and then you can just go use it. Like there's a link there to the widget for how to do it. And I think that's going to be a major step forward for our developer story. As you know, as always, like you can never have enough widgets. I think we are at the point now where, like, yeah, there's not that many things missing, quote unquote, to like build like really nice adaptive apps. But there's always additional things where you can make things easier for app developers, and I don't really see that changing anytime soon. One thing that we've talked about recently was sort of like having a built-in version of like sort of the adaptive side of a tabs widget. So like we have them in tabs, but they are like basically desktop only. And ideally, we would like as part of that to have sort of like a mobile component as well, where like you have your text editor or whatever that like has tabs on a desktop. But then if you want it to run on a mobile form factor, like it would be cool to if the tabs just like work there as well, and you don't have to do something custom. Like Epiphany has a custom tabs implementation that sort of does essentially this. But it would be cooler if app developers didn't have to do a whole bunch of work to get that. So I have a demo here. Let's see. I have a demo here that Alexander made. This is kind of like, so on desktop you just like have basically these regular tabs. You can do all the regular tab things. And then if you like resize it to a smaller size, you get this panel here at the bottom where you can like add and remove tabs, switch between them and so on. Like this design is like not 100% set in stone, but I think something in this direction is probably what we're going to go with for GTK3. For GTK4, it's an open question. Like we might do something fancier or not, like depending on various other factors. But yeah, this is something that we would really like to have. Then there's a bunch of things that are more like on the wish list, but that I want to talk about, like just sort of to give you a more general idea of like the kinds of things that we're thinking about. So one problem with, so the last few years we've generally moved most layouts to list boxes. It's just like a cleaner, more flexible pattern than the old kind of like form layout. But one of the problems with that is that entries don't really work that well in that. So they don't really mix that well with list rows. And so it would be cool to have list rows that are like optimized for that kind of work, for that kind of layout. And so we have designed for a new Listro entry widget that would basically look a little bit like this in context, where you have a Listro that is actually the entry, as opposed to like having sort of like a box and then another box inside the box, and the label kind of like taking up half the width, so you can only have really narrow ones. And it would solve a whole bunch of issues with that. It's not like a deal breaker for anything, but it would be cool to have. So yeah, if anyone's interested in helping with that, by the way, contact us. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that probably we're gonna look at medium term once all the libwider stuff lands and so on. Another one in a similar vein is the whole in-stack dialog kind of situation, where like on desktop you want dialog to be a separate window that's just like overlaid, right? But on mobile that doesn't always make sense, because like, you know, if your window sort of needs to take up the whole screen anyway, you like structurally it would make more sense if it was just like a panel that you can swipe away, right? Like, so it's basically an in-stack view instead of a separate window. And technically that's kind of difficult, because yeah, you need to like sort of dynamically get rid of a window, of a secondary window, and merge it into the All right. Yeah, sorry about that. ISP issue, I guess. I don't know. No internet anywhere in the house. Yeah, I'm not sure what that means for the schedule, because I theoretically have like 3 minutes left. But yeah, I don't know. Well, yeah, Telegram is the only thing that worked, because like there was like, I tried to ping, and like basically every 15 seconds, like 3 packages went through, and the website was not loading at all. I have no idea. But yeah, I don't know, like this, do any of the organizers want to tell me what to do? Like, should we just cancel it at this point? Because yeah, I can't finish it in 2 minutes. I can go until 53. All right, yeah, maybe we can make that work. I'll try to be fast then. So yeah, there's some more stuff to be done on system dialogues. There's ongoing work, but yeah, this needs to be this needs some more work basically. But yeah, let's get to the really cool part of the talk, which is GTK4 stuff. So as you know, GTK4 is out. There's not that many apps using it yet, but like we're like at the point where we can start porting to it very soon. And there's like a few things in particular that I'm very excited about. The first of those is animation. And that's just like in general, but like specifically a few things that we can do now that we could never do before is things like this, which is like proper physics-based animation of like various different things. This is a demo that Alexander put together, I think with some help from Manuel Genovese also. They really like did an amazing job like making sort of proper physics-based string animations work. And this is like all GTK, you know. It feels weird, you know, to be saying that, or you know what I mean, like. But yeah, this is like a whole new world of animations that we could never really do before. And yeah, the next thing that's probably we're not going to be using a whole lot, but it is something that's cool to have, like for a lot of like sort of smaller details. Similar to on the web, I think, is 3D transforms. And here's a very interesting demo of something that we're definitely not going to do, but like sort of that shows off the power of this a little bit, where it's like a full like 3D environment. And yeah, this is all GTK4. So yeah, a 3D transform is something that we could never really do before with GTK widget, and that we will be able to do with GTK4. And yeah, it's one of those things that is great to have in your tool set, even if you don't use it a ton. But really, the thing that I think I'm most excited about is probably just the ability to scale things, because that was kind of like a huge bottleneck for a lot of like the nicer animation stuff in GTK3. Because we could move things, but like actually scaling them is really important for a lot of the things that you actually want to do with animation, especially when it comes to like transitioning between states and so on. And yeah, that is something that we can finally do. And this demo, I think, really shows off what you can do with that. Also, huge kudos to Alexander for putting that together. So on desktop or like on a large size, you like have sort of a regular tab bar. And like if you resize it, you sort of like get this mobile thing. But also, there's this button that you can click, and it like actually zooms out the tab, and it gives you a grid with sort of like all the other tabs. And this is the kind of UI that personally, like I'm not sure how familiar you are with like my history of giving talks, but like this was my very first Quadic talk, was about basically this kind of stuff, like semantic animation, like these kinds of like state transitions between sort of like completely different states that are like totally spatially clean. And yeah, I could not be more excited about the kind of stuff that that we're going to be able to do this kind of stuff. And also, one interesting thing that this demo does is this very cool sort of like clean spatial color switcher. I think it's using shaders or something. I don't really understand this. You can ask Alexander in the chat, but yeah, this is the kind of amazing shit that we're going to be able to do with GTK4. One final demo that kind of puts it all together into one really awesome package is this one, which is basically like the ability to morph layouts and like keep elements around. So like here we have these wallpapers and like a label and this icon, and I can click one, and it not only scales up the wallpaper, but it keeps the text and the icon around, where basically like they actually move to their new position. I'm sure like you can see 0 of these things in the actual stream, but I'm gonna put links somewhere where you can actually build these yourself. But this is the kind of stuff that I've been personally waiting for many years to be able to do this in GTK, and it's amazing that this is finally on the horizon. So yeah, quick summary, since we have probably like 2 more minutes. Mainline Linux phones are a real thing now. Developers have them and are using them to make really awesome stuff. Our app ecosystem is like going it up with left and right. It's really cool. Our developer experience with the widget library and the HIG is looking better than ever, and yeah, some really cool stuff there on the horizon. And GTK4 stuff, I mean, yeah, do I need to say anything else? Like, this looks so amazing. Like, it's really a whole new world. So yeah, that's just to say the future looks really bright, and I'm excited about where like GNOME, not only mobile but desktop and like everywhere else is going in the near-term future. Some quick thanks, because yeah, I'm the designer here. Like most of the stuff that I'm showing you here is obviously made by other people. A huge thanks to Alexander Michalenko for not only like making most of the stuff that I showed you today, but also like just helping with demos and like always being around. Thank you so much. But also the rest of the Purism crew, Adrian Plazas, Peter Günther, Julian Sparber, for all the work, like porting all the apps, like reviewing things, like really everything that you're doing. It's so amazing. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of people from the community as well who have done amazing work. Xander, Felix, Andre, Bilal, and really many others. And yeah, let's not forget about the design team, or like the wider design team, Alan and Jakub, who have been doing a lot of really good work on the HIG. Yeah, as I said, like most of the stuff that I'm showing you here is not like my work, but sort of like a summary of stuff that this whole community has done. I'm really proud of what we've achieved over the last 2 years. Yeah, if you would like to be part of this amazing community, here are some ways to get involved. It's all on GNOME GitLab, or like there's matrix rooms that you can join and hang out. Yeah, join us. Let's build awesome things. Thanks. And yeah, do we have time for questions, or I guess not, right?
I'm now unmuted. Not really, but if you want, you can write down the answers to the questions of the shared notes.
Okay, yeah, I can do that sort of just like asynchronously, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then yeah, thanks so much, everyone, and sorry about the glitch. I guess at least I got to finish it somehow. Thanks so much.